The biggest data breaches in history and what we learned. Imagine waking up one morning to discover that your name, your email address, your password, your phone number, your home address, and even your social security number are floating freely on the dark web, bought and sold like cheap commodities by criminals you will never meet. Now imagine that happening not to you alone, but to 3 billion people simultaneously. That is not a hypothetical nightmare. That actually happened. And today, we are going to walk through the most catastrophic data breaches in human history, understand exactly how they occurred, and extract the critical lessons that every individual and organization desperately needs to hear. Background: the age of data vulnerability. We live in an era where data is the most valuable resource on the planet. More valuable than oil. More valuable than gold. Every time you create an account, make a purchase, or simply browse a website, you are generating personal data that companies collect, store, and sometimes, tragically, fail to protect. The modern internet economy runs entirely on this data. Companies build enormous databases containing hundreds of millions of user records, and those databases become irresistible targets for cybercriminals operating from every corner of the globe. The global cost of cybercrime is projected to reach $10 trillion annually by 2025. That staggering number did not appear from thin air. It was built brick by brick through decades of negligence, poor security practices, underfunded IT departments, and attackers who grew smarter and more sophisticated with every passing year. Understanding the biggest breaches in history is not simply an exercise in reliving disasters. It is the most powerful educational tool we have for preventing the next catastrophe. The Yahoo breach, 3 billion accounts. No conversation about historic data breaches can begin anywhere other than Yahoo. In 2013, Yahoo suffered what would eventually be confirmed as the largest data breach in recorded history, affecting 3 billion user accounts. Every single account Yahoo possessed at the time was compromised. The breach was not fully disclosed until 2016, and the complete scope was not acknowledged until 2017, meaning Yahoo sat on this information for years while users remained completely unaware that their credentials were in criminal hands. What was stolen? Names, email addresses, telephone numbers, dates of birth, hashed passwords, and in some cases, encrypted or unencrypted security questions and answers. The method Yahoo used to hash passwords was MD5, an algorithm so outdated and weak that security researchers had been warning companies against using it for years prior to the breach. Attackers were able to crack millions of these passwords with relative ease. The consequences were severe. Yahoo's acquisition by Verizon was reduced by $350 million because of the breach. Users who recycled their Yahoo passwords on other platforms, banking sites, email accounts, social media, found those accounts compromised as well. This is what cybersecurity professionals call credential stuffing, and Yahoo's breach fueled credential stuffing attacks for years afterward. The lesson here is brutally simple: weak cryptographic practices and delayed disclosure cause exponentially greater damage than the initial breach itself. Equifax. When the gatekeepers fail in 2017, Equifax, one of the 3 major credit reporting agencies in the United States, announced that attackers had gained access to the personal information of approximately 147 million Americans. This was not just any data. This was extraordinarily sensitive financial data: social security numbers, birth dates, home addresses, driver's license numbers, and in some cases, credit card numbers. Equifax is literally a company whose entire purpose is to be trusted with sensitive financial information. The irony of this breach is almost too painful to express. How did it happen? Attackers exploited a known vulnerability in Apache Struts, an open-source web application framework. A patch for this exact vulnerability had been available for 2 months before the breach occurred. Equifax simply had not applied it. Their internal security processes were so inadequate that an outdated piece of software sat exposed, unpatched, and accessible for over 60 days while criminals mapped the network, elevated their privileges, and systematically extracted sensitive data. The fallout was historic. Equifax paid $575 million in a settlement with the Federal Trade Commission. Their CEO resigned. Millions of Americans were forced to freeze their credit, monitor their financial accounts obsessively, and live with the knowledge that their most sensitive identifying information was permanently compromised. You cannot change your social security number. Once that data is out, it is out forever. The lesson from Equifax is one of the most repeated and most ignored in cybersecurity: patch your systems. Apply security updates promptly. Conduct regular vulnerability assessments. A $575 million disaster was entirely preventable with routine software maintenance. Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, data as a weapon. Not every major data incident involves a hacker breaking through digital walls. Sometimes the most damaging breaches occur when data is simply given away through negligence or exploited through technical loopholes. The Facebook and Cambridge Analytica scandal, which exploded publicly in 2018, represents exactly this type of breach. Through a third-party quiz application, Cambridge Analytica harvested personal data from approximately 87 million Facebook users without their meaningful consent. The application technically operated within Facebook's API permissions at the time, allowing it to collect not only the data of users who installed the app but also the data of their entire friend networks. This one technical oversight, allowing apps to vacuum up friends' data, exposed tens of millions of people who had never interacted with the application at all. This data was then allegedly used to build psychological profiles of American voters and target them with highly personalized political advertising during the 2016 presidential election. Suddenly, a cybersecurity issue became a democratic crisis. Facebook was fined $5 billion by the FTC in what was the largest privacy-related fine in American history at that time. Mark Zuckerberg testified before Congress. The world started asking uncomfortable questions about surveillance capitalism and what social media companies actually do with all that data they accumulate. The lesson is profound: data collection policies matter enormously. When you allow third parties to access user data without rigorous controls, you lose the ability to guarantee how that data will be used. Minimal data collection, strict API controls, and genuine user consent are not optional ethical preferences. They are fundamental security requirements. Marriott International, the invisible attacker. In 2018, Marriott International disclosed a breach affecting approximately 500 million guests of its Starwood hotel properties. The compromised data included names, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, passport numbers, and payment card information. But the most alarming detail was this: the attackers had been inside the Starwood network since 2014. For years. Marriott had acquired Starwood in 2016 and inadvertently acquired the hidden attackers along with it. The breach went entirely undetected for 4 years before anyone realized something was wrong. This breach is attributed with moderate confidence to a Chinese state-sponsored hacking group, suggesting the primary motivation may have been intelligence gathering rather than financial crime, specifically targeting the travel records of government officials, military personnel, and intelligence community members. Passport numbers combined with travel histories create extraordinarily detailed profiles of high-value targets. The key lesson from Marriott is the critical importance of network monitoring and threat detection. For years of unauthorized access represents a catastrophic failure of intrusion detection systems. Organizations must invest in continuous monitoring, behavioral analytics, and incident response capabilities that can identify unusual activity patterns before attackers spend years quietly extracting data. When companies acquire other businesses, they must conduct thorough cybersecurity audits of the acquired infrastructure before integration. Inheriting a company means inheriting all of its vulnerabilities. Deep analysis, the patterns that keep repeating. Looking across all of these massive breaches, unmistakable patterns emerge with uncomfortable clarity. First, unpatched software and outdated systems are responsible for an enormous percentage of successful attacks. Second, organizations consistently fail to detect breaches for months or even years, giving attackers unlimited time to extract maximum value. Third, poor encryption and weak password hashing practices transform manageable security incidents into catastrophic credential disasters. Fourth, third-party vendors and acquired companies introduce vulnerabilities that organizations fail to audit adequately. Fifth, disclosure delays compound the damage by depriving users of the ability to protect themselves in a timely manner.